The Sermon on the Mount is one of Jesus' most famous teachings, and it's one of the biggest stretches of Jesus' teachings that come at once. You can see it in Matthew chapters 5 to 7, and it's a subject that has brought a lot of benefit and actually a lot of controversy to the church over the years. People look at it and they're not really sure what to do with it. We're all familiar with the fact that we're saved by grace, and that if it weren't for Jesus' sacrifice on the cross, none of us would be right with God. None of us could be right with God. We're very used to, especially those of us who are evangelical, we're very used to the idea the law existed in the Old Testament. It was really difficult. Nobody could keep it perfectly. We've all sinned. We've all fallen short of the glory of God. That's why we need the cross, because we can't be righteous in our own strength. The Old Testament's all about the law, all about the stuff you have to do. The New Testament is all about grace and the stuff that we can't do on our own. Right? Looking at the Sermon on the Mount, it's a little bit different than we might expect. If that's our framework, we look at Jesus saying things like, "You have heard it said, thou shalt not kill." Yes, we've all heard that said. That's the 10 Commandments. It's basic stuff. And he says, "But I say to you, anyone who hates his brother without cause has committed murder in his heart." Well, this has just raised the stakes. In thou shalt not kill, all I have to do is refrain from killing people. I can do that. I have lived 30 years and with a perfect kill-free record. But under the Sermon on the Mount, I can't look at somebody and wish they were dead. I can't look at somebody and hate them and loathe them and wish I could erase their presence, but of course I won't do that because I'm too good for that. Jesus says, no, you committed murder in your heart. As another example, look at Jesus' exhortations about forgiveness. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who persecute you and spitefully use you. Well, that just doesn't seem fair to us. We look at that and go, well, what about my rights? That person is talking badly about me. If you look at persecution, whether we're talking about broad-scale persecution, as in Christians in oppressive regimes where they literally get tortured and killed, or you look at small-scale persecution where there's just that guy at work who keeps making snide comments to you and undermines you to your boss. It's not fair, that's not right. And Jesus says, pray for that person. Well, whose side are you on, Jesus? I have a right to stick up for myself and to fight fire with fire. He started it, I get to finish it. And the Sermon on the Mount, if we look at it just as a list of tasks, just as a list of expectations, things that we're meant to do, it can feel really, really daunting, to the point where some theologians actually speculate that Jesus gave the Sermon on the Mount to convict us about how badly we can't do any of this, and that's why we need the cross. So we're going to fail at the Sermon on the Mount, left, right, and center, and Jesus knew it, and that's the point. Well, I would contend that while, yes, you should look at the Sermon on the Mount and go, oh, Lord, I need help, because we can't do it in our own strength. But the point isn't just to say, you can't do it, better ask for forgiveness. The point is to say, you can't do this, ask for help. Ask for forgiveness when you fail, but ask for the power of the Spirit of God to help you carry it out. Because when you start looking at the Sermon on the Mount as a big list of to-do, as a big list of if you are a good Christian, you will X, Y, Z, it can feel super, super burdensome. But have we thought about the alternative? So in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says to pray for those who persecute you, to forgive the people who wrong you, to love your enemies. Okay, there's that thing that rises up in us and goes, but that's not fair. But what's the alternative? The alternative to forgiving my enemies is to spend the rest of my life stewing in hatred for them. To not pray for those who persecute me is to spend the rest of my life resentful and either fighting back in an ungodly way or self-pitying because I can't even fight back and woe is me, but I am forbidden from doing it. But it means I actually get my heart softened for that person. So I really can start to love them and really can start to get in touch with God's desire to save them. And this is an important point with this stuff. With the Sermon on the Mount, it has an eternal perspective to it. We see it in Jesus' teaching on prayer, where if you go out and you pray on the street corner so everybody sees and everybody's amazed at how spiritual you are, you've gotten your reward, and your reward is people being impressed. But if you go into your closet alone and pray, your Father who sees in secret will reward you openly. So firstly, the Sermon on the Mount is connected with the idea that God will make these things right eventually, so I don't have to. But going back to the main point, the Sermon on the Mount is hard. It is legitimately hard to forgive somebody who's mistreating you. It is legitimately hard to pray for somebody who's making your life miserable on purpose. It is legitimately hard to guard your heart against the lust and the anger or the murder that tries to rise up in us. But that means we don't have lust and anger and murder rising up in us. Jesus' commandments to us are for our good. I don't want to live my life enslaved to anger and to bitterness. I don't want to live my life constantly at war with the people around me who are making my life difficult. Because let's be honest, there will always be people in my life who make my life difficult. Because that's the fallen human race. What are you going to do? You can either get angry, stay angry, develop bitter and rage and murder, and become a really hardened, jaded, unhappy, bitter person who just doesn't want to be around anybody. Like, I can keep from killing anybody, but that's about all you're getting from me, God. Or you can be somebody with a free heart. I don't have to hang on to that offense because I don't have to make it right. I don't have to strike back at that person who is wronging me in physical, material, emotional ways because I was a sinner too. I still have that wrestle to not give in to temptation, and Christ died for me, so I don't have to suffer for my wrongs, and can I extend that mercy to another? Becoming a person who is tender-hearted, whose default response is to love rather than hate, whose default response is to forgive rather than to latch on to anger. Now, of course, this is not to say that you never take steps to resolve broken relationships, that you never take steps to resolve ongoing conflict or to, bring the situation before your supervisor or the police or, whatever the situation calls for. But this is talking about what's going on the inside. Is your heart alive in love? Is your heart soft towards the Lord and towards the people around you? Or are you sinking to that level of destruction and malice that exists among ungodly people? So the Sermon on the Mount is hard. We need to ask for help. We need to ask for grace. We need to ask for forgiveness because, let's be real, we're going to stumble from time to time. But it's not a burden. This is freedom. This is living in a holy lifestyle, not because, it's a drudgery, but God said it, so therefore we've got to do it. But it's embracing His wisdom and living in a way that says, your ways are higher than mine. You are right. I believe, God, that you've got my back and that you're going to make the wrong things in my life right. It's living a life of faith. It's living a life of love, and it's living a life where we don't have to be sucked into that vortex of anger and grossness ever again. So I want to talk more about this next week. If you have thoughts or comments, please do leave them in the comments below. I'd love to hear questions, ideas, what the Lord is saying to you or has been saying to you in the past about these topics. We'll be back next week and talk about this a little bit more. This is a wonderful, wonderful passage of Scripture. I'm really excited to share more with you about it. I'm Amanda Beatty, and this has been the Interwebercessor channel. See you in the next video. Bye.